Welcome to the Open Talent Report, the award-winning podcast where we dive deep into the emerging trends in global employment, the future of work, the talent crisis, the demographic deficit, and the new world of work with our expert host, Connor Heaney. Connor is the managing director at CXE EMEA, a company that takes the hassle out of finding, compliantly engaging, and paying contractors anywhere in the world. In this podcast, Connor brings you captivating conversations with top CEOs, visionary founders, and industry experts. Together, they shed light on all things open talent and the evolving nature of work itself. So grab your headphones and join us on this exhilarating journey.
Hello and welcome to this week's show. I'm delighted to be joined by John Younger, returning guest to the show. John, great to see you. Also delighted to be joined by Pedro Donati and Alvaro Oliveira. And these gentlemen, folks, are the founding team at a really interesting platform called Mensch. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Yiddish, or indeed who are familiar with Yiddish, this translates as a person of high integrity or honor. So I'm very interested, John, Pedro, Alvaro, to hear more about this. But before we get into that, guys, it's great to have you on the show. I think this is the most guests we've had on at the one time. So I'm a little overwhelmed and slightly anxious, but I think, we're in good company. We're going to be fine. And I think our listeners are really going to enjoy the conversation that we're going to have. So, but before we dive into Mensch and the amazing things that you guys are doing on your platform, John, our listeners and audience are well familiar with you. Most of them read Forbes, and I think this is your third time on the show, which is bloody brilliant, of course. But perhaps if we just start with Alvaro. Alvaro, would you mind, just for the benefit of our audience, giving a brief bio or background, the pop quiz history of Alvaro? Thank you.
Sure. And thanks for having me. Happy to be here. The long and short of it is, I'll say I'm a technologist that has always been, as a developer, involved in technology in one way, shape, or form, that has found himself to be part of the talent marketplaces and has helped build a few of the prominent ones out there. And I've always used my connection to being a technologist to really empathize with the supply side, as they say, of those marketplaces and connect with the talent and build solutions that work really well for them.
Thanks, Alvaro. And Alvaro, you come from quite an interesting platform called Andela. Is that correct? Did I get that wrong?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, that's good. So maybe we're
correct. Yes.
We'll maybe touch on Africa later, because I think there's a topic I want to address, if that's okay. Pedro, what's your pop quiz history? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me here. Pedro Donati. My background is I major in computer science, and I've always worked both as an entrepreneur or an executive, helping companies to incorporate new technology and work in innovative ways. So transform the way that people are relating with the company, that power is structured, that decisions are being made in order to make that company not only more agile, but also able to empower itself with new technology capabilities, both for use internally and externally. So I've been doing that for the past, let's say, 25 years. I've been an executive and a director for some of the largest banks in Latin America, and also an entrepreneur, helping several companies in different industries in doing so.
Wow, I like that, Pedro. We'll come back to LATAM later in the show, I hope, because I'm really interested in some of the demographics in certain countries in the region. John, last but not least, what's your pop quiz, my friend?
I want to tell a story. So I started out a million years ago in psychology and took a graduate degree in psychology, taught a little bit at the University of Toronto and then at a couple of other schools. But I was meant to be in business. I was not meant to be an academic. And so my interest turned into a consulting gig. And we built a consulting firm called the Novations Group that was very focused on internal talent. Now, if you were to go to Rich Wilson at Gigged AI, who, Connor, you and I both know well, he would say that internal talent, something that, John, you were really involved in for a while, is not the complete story. There's two other parts. There's external talent, the freelance world, as you and I have grown up in. But there's also a new sheriff in town, if we may call it that, and that is the technology has developed to such an extent that the idea, and this is Pedro teaching me here, that the ability of AI and AI agents in particular to be digital coworkers, true coworkers, to employees of a business, whether it's large or small, really establishes them as the third leg of the stool. We've done so much, Connor, to create the first leg, which is internal talent. And we've done so much over the last decade, you and I and many others, to build the understanding of external talent. Now it's our opportunity to say, what does digital co-working really look like? What is the possibility of man-machine collaboration, person-machine collaboration? How's that going to look? What's it going to create? And how do we build the engines and the organizations of the future to make that happen? I'm 73. This is my sixth startup. And I got to tell you, I'm more excited about this one than the other two. And most of it's because of Pedro and Alvaro, who are truly so standout experts in that field. I'm learning from them, bringing the freelance stuff, bringing the internal talent to that. And hopefully we've got a complete organization that is able to deliver AI agents to organizations that work, that fit, that are made for them, and that deliver a much better outcome than hoping to give people boring, standardized work and hoping that they do it well. So that's my story these days. I'm up for the next challenge, and I got to tell you, it's really exciting.
Wow. John, this is what I love about Americans on a general basis. It's the ability to be articulate, the ability to be humble, but also the ability to be somewhat braggy. And if you can do that trifecta, I think you're going to win in life. I could listen to, as my grandmother would say, all day. So maybe but John, I think you've painted a really compelling picture, and I want to delve into the bring your own agent, if you like, or the orchestration of agents alongside humans very shortly. But before we do that, gentlemen, perhaps one of you would be so kind to tell me the story of Mensch. Where the idea came from, where you guys are going, the problems and challenges that you're going to solve for and anticipate solving for, and really where you're going to go next. So I'd love to hear that story, and I think our listeners would too, gents.
Fellas, you're on.
Right, I can dive in onto that one. Mensch actually came about in a very interesting way, and it already iterated so much, which is really connecting to its startup roots. John and I have been talking for ages. John and I have known each other for years now, and we've always really liked the idea of potentially working together. And this year, the opportunity presented itself. And John, that there's one thing that John is not great at, and that is retiring. And as he failed at that miserably, him and I started this new journey. And in parallel to that, and our new journey was around transformation, right? So we have obviously in our own careers in different companies that we either worked at or worked with, we have seen transformation be a big challenge and not always done well. A lot of times great decks around the strategy and the high level, but when it comes down to execution, we have unfortunately seen a lot of missteps and hardship and even challenges for the people involved and a lot of turnover. So really negative things that a business will not be looking forward to. So John and I decided to take a stab at that and see, is there something we can do there? And that's where we started talking more formally about Mensch and going there. But it's 2025. You can't talk about transformation and not talk about AI. And in that, I had also in parallel, Pedro and I, who also have known each other for years, have also been doing some interesting things with AI, and both of us having written code earlier in our lives, but it has been a while, we were getting excited again about writing code and being more connected to the technology directly because of what AI enabled. And we started to see the potential that agents had in helping transforming businesses. And that's where it just made complete sense for those kind of two journeys to become just one
Yep.
And that was the first iteration of Mensch, bringing now the three of us together, where we're talking about transformation. We're hyper-focused on the people side of transformation, but we're bringing AI agents to it because it's the reality, it's where we are, and we do believe companies can't afford to not consider that as part of their journey anymore. But we think we can bring a thoughtful, down-to-earth approach to doing that well, which we believe is a little bit of a difference from the hyperbole that you see around AI everywhere right now. It's like it's going to take over the world, and I think it's going to help a lot. And that's what we're building Mensch to help do.
It sounds incredibly excited, guys. And on the long term, I must confess, listeners won't be surprised. I'm down on AI. I'm really concerned about the potential negative downsides for humanity generally, right? And really about jobs and meaning. But let's put that aside, because in the short to medium term, I absolutely share your excitement, and I'm really thrilled. And I actually have this sort of butterfly feeling in my stomach or my belly about where this could potentially go. Not just for platforms like yours, but even in my day job, the business that I'm lucky enough to run. Pedro, John, how does it work, right? So how does the platform work? I think that will be of interest. Of course, we're not doing a live demo or anything like that, but at a high level, what does it look like? How does it work? And how do you bring all this together? Because it strikes me as something that isn't necessarily straightforward, and that's okay. But would any of you guys care to showcase at a high level what it might look like?
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
So just before diving into that, I just wanted to mention something that you said now, and because I too got this butterfly feeling, and it's true, the impact is going to be massive. We've seen big impacts before, right? I mean, I've been in tech for 30 years, and so we've seen big impacts before. We used to have companies with no computers, no microcomputers, no spreadsheets, and people were drawing architectural designs on paper, and then microcomputers came in, and then what they did is that they didn't learn how to use it. They actually just took the drawing and sent to some copier, which is a young guy that was working there and knew how to operate the CAD and the computer, and will copy that paper design into the computer design. And later on, they retired. And then that new generation knew how to handle the microcomputers and the spreadsheets and that new kind of tech that were operating in the office. And the transition happened as a generational transition. So we are used to transitions, but not this fast. The way that is happening today, people that are running their jobs now will need to learn the new skills. We will need to learn to adapt. And that is why we created Mensch. We created Mensch because we feel it's important to reimagine how work happens, to redesign how people in AR are mixed together in this. So when we decided what to offer in order to satisfy that pursuit of trying to help companies adapt faster, because it's not a matter of if it's going to happen or not, it's really a matter of how can we help everyone adapt faster? That's where we should focus, not on, well, what if we prevent this from happening, or what if decisions go sideways? And we cannot interfere on that. But what we can actually do is help everyone adapt faster and embrace how this can change the way they work. So we try to design our offers based on that. How can we make everyone adapt easier? And we discovered that means education. So people need to become fluent in using AI for their use, for themselves. Either you're using just a tool or an agentic AI system, but you're using something for you, so that you perform an outcome in ways that you couldn't do before. And it feels like you're having superpowers when you do that. It's amazing. But there's a lot of kind of educational offers in the market, but the sort of education that we see in the market today is more towards like certifying someone. So it's interesting for you in the resume because now you have those certifications, but we wanted to do something that was really target into implementation. So how can people actually do something that will change their everyday life and change the company around them, the people in the company around them? Again, going for the transformation side that Alvaro was mentioning. The second part is that people not only need to learn how to use AI for themselves, for their production of jobs or work, but also they need to learn that AI is part of the processes in the company. The processes in the company use AI without people needing to be part of that directly. And that means a digital worker. That means that in a company structure, you would see people and digital workers working alongside, flowing the processes from one to the other. It's not any sort of agent, but actually one that we design in a way that would fit in a company easier. So we created a digital worker. We created an artificial intelligence agent that behaves as a digital worker, which means that the jobs that the digital worker is running and how the jobs are being performed is aligned with manager. The digital worker reports to the manager about the execution of the jobs and collaborates with peers when necessary to fulfill those jobs. You see, we when we're structuring a company, we don't want the workflows to be just done anyway as long as you get to the outcome. No, we want to know how they are done. So our digital worker, Gaia, she correctly fulfills all the steps in executing the jobs, reports to the manager, uses the company tools, has her own email password login to go into the current company systems and perform those activities. And the entry point, the place where Gaia fits within that structure, is on the kind of jobs that are just rule-based and just operational, so that we can bring into the company the first step into let's redistribute work, taking humans into activities less of an autonomous kind of scripting acting, and leave those into those digital workers that can be part of that structure. So our offering is AI fluency, is education, both for the people that become more productive and for the structure of the company with the digital workers working alongside with humans.
Beautiful.
That is beautiful, Pedro and Alvaro. Couple of questions, and I love where you're going. The first question, and this might seem like an obvious or even dumb question. Both, the dumb questions are always the dangerous ones, though, weren't they? But if you think about the commercial model for your platform, gents, my assumption is that there will be a significant delta between deploying a human versus deploying Gaia. Is your business model going to be based on that sort of price competitiveness when you compare human versus digital worker? And then two, is the business going to be based on a volume play, right? The more digital workers, the better it is for you guys, or what's the mix?
So let me take a step back and give you sort of a little context on that, and then let the rest of the fellows add to that. First is, what kinds of organizations are we interested in? And clearly, we're a startup, so we're interested in every organization in the universe. But within that, we think that our sweet spot is mid-market. We think that there are big companies that are dealing with the Anthropics and all of those guys. They're providing all kinds of support to the big enterprises, and we can't compete with them. But if you think about mid-market and fast-growing small to mid-market companies that are profitable, that are being run by either their owner or a significant shareholder, they're profitable, but they lack significant tech resources, we think that we can provide incredible value for those guys. When you talk about volume, it's a really interesting question. So let me take just one step back, if I can, Connor, and say there was a really good piece of work done by a consulting firm called TI People that, by the way, you should have on your show. They've done a fabulous job of taking a look at AI and HR. They're a Hamburg-based German consultancy. And what they found was that about 60% of the work of that HR organization across 15 different companies, about 60% of that work is low value, routine, automatable work. Let's not have people doing that. We're just burning the people out. We're not getting much value. We're charging a lot more. We're paying a lot more to get that work done than we would if we were having some software doing a lot of that. There's a second category of work, and the category of work is what they call strategic or strategic support. In other words, if you think about talent management as a key issue, understanding who you've got within your organization and where they're at and what they're ready to do next, that's strategic support. And so within those kinds of opportunities, you're not replacing the human, you're augmenting the human by providing them access to those kinds of data that allows them to make different and better decisions, different and better recommendations. We believe that there's an extraordinary opportunity within a wide range of mid-market and smaller companies. And I'll give you one example. One example is that there are 12,000 florists in the United States making an average of $700,000 in gross revenues. How many of those florists could use AI to connect better with their customers, to describe promotions before the flowers age, to talk about special events and develop a list of their clients prior to a wedding, prior to an anniversary, sending them the stuff? I mean, that's just the beginning. So do we think there's a volume play? Yes, at two levels. One is we think there are 12,000 florists alone in the United States that would benefit from our work. And second, we think that they would benefit in two ways. Not only to get greater cost efficiency, but also the outreach to clients and earning the business of future larger customer groups is a second area where we think that they can make incredible progress. They lack the resources, they lack the arms and legs, they lack the tech, but increasingly we think that a process that educates them, helps them to vision, as Pedro said, what's possible, works with them closely to develop the AI agent and implement and make sure it's working well. It's not a gazillion dollars as an investment. It can be done very efficiently in terms of investment. Wow. I mean, I think this is the next step in transformation is AI.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that vision.
You were worried about
I can't help it.
one thing, and that is, I know. And I know there's lots of people worried about AI. And I think that there are people worried about the initial employee, and is there an opportunity for people at the beginning, the bottom of the ladder? Are we going to move people out because their information isn't quick enough? I think all of that stuff is going to happen. I think there will be some losses. But Connor, I also believe that it's kind of like the internet. It's kind of like the Industrial Revolution, where at the end of the day, net new creation is much greater than the net loss. So I'm very excited. I think we've got a responsibility to make sure that we're teaching people how to use this stuff, making them conversant, making them competent. But gee whiz, I am not afraid of this any more than a musician should be afraid of records and radio.
Yeah, I really like that what you have both outlined there, John, and it's hard not to feel excited, right? Despite those misgivings. Not about your platform. I'm all in. All right, I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing.
No, I understand.
Yeah. I think what I'm also hearing as well, guys, is that there's a potential play here to maybe attack some of the traditional consulting's business lines and business opportunities. Because if I think, and listen, there's some amazing large global consulting organizations out there, but if I think about it from the buyer perspective, right, that old phrase, no one ever got fired for buying IBM, right? When you bring in one of the top 10 or top 20 consulting organizations, you're essentially, as a buyer, absolving yourself from responsibility, right? So you're essentially pushing the problem to these guys. Now, if those guys win, you win. If they don't deliver what they need to do, it's their fault, right? And everyone's good, right? And then you bring in the next wave of consultants to look at the report that the last consultants do, and then the whole merry-go-round starts again, right? So in some respects, it's almost the perfect business model. But There's been a lot of commentary online, and certainly if you look at some of the financials of the larger consulting organizations, they're beginning to lose market share and suffer from revenue attrition and also client loss. My question really is twofold. One, are the traditional large global consultings companies starting to die? And two, is that a market that you guys are going after with your transformation and technology combined?
Alvaro, you want to talk about that for a sec? Because we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah. I'm the short answer technologist person, so I would say yes. Both.
I can add to that. Yes, I can add to that. Yes, there's clear transformation in the consulting industry at all, because and that is because on the old days the accumulation of experts was a differentiation for that industry, and that has been changing over the years as knowledge is more accessible and implementation of change becomes more important. So you see a pulverization of small boutique abilities of implementation moving faster than the transatlantic big ones can actually do. And over time, of course, that no one will blame that big name, kind of wears down a little into what it represents for executives in the company, because the demands for that companies have over its C-level also have matured and changed over time. So what we're seeing is naturally that film going by. The way that we've been talking about this is really a big opportunity, because what we want to do with Mensch is not to be everywhere. We are a small team, and we intend to stay small. We grow with automations. We grow with digital workers alongside with us within Mensch. And so we want to see ourselves as an infrastructure that can provide the educational structure, the digital worker for any of those implementation, because anyone that's working on implementation has the same purpose that we have. We want to pursue change. We want to make companies adapt and adapt faster. So we see them as channels or partners, as other companies that could use that structure that we are building here and apply this, because we're talking to companies in different parts of the world right now. And even though after you say it's kind of obvious, it wasn't obvious to me at the beginning. They are all on the same stage. There's no, you're talking to a US company that is way ahead of the other one in Latin America. No. They're all at the same stage. It's new to everyone. And not, it's not always that you can say that. The common situation is that you find some regions in the globe that are further ahead, but that's not what's happening right now. Since everyone is on the same page, we talk a lot about, how can we amplify what we're doing? The three of us here are not gonna be able to talk to companies everywhere all the time. So becoming this infrastructure with partners that go over the implementation is part of our strategy, actually.
Yeah.
Connor,
Yes, John.
I'd add just a little bit to what the fellows are saying. I think that what we're doing in AI is forcing consultancies to adapt and evolve. So if you sort of think about a typical kind of a strategy project, right? We start with a strategy. We're doing a lot of external benchmarking. We're trying to understand what's going on out in the marketplace. We go from there to a clarification of strategy. We go from there to a macro organization design. We go from there to a detailed organization design. And then what we know is that 70% of the time the work stops. And work stops because we don't have the arms and legs, we don't have the time, and because we're moving on as fast as we possibly can without having made the changes that are so important. What we think we bring to the marketplace uniquely is the ability to collapse detailed design and implementation in one step. So rather than having to describe it and then review it and then design against it and then deploy it, we're doing that all together in one piece. Saves the organization a ton of time, saves the organization a ton of money, because there's a whole sort of phase of consulting that's now put into implementation as opposed to initial design. What we're also finding is that in the strategy work at the very beginning, all that external research is now being done through generative AI. And that so much of the consulting bill can't be covered historically, because why would you have four new MBAs from Harvard or Stanford or Berkeley going out for 3 months interviewing hundreds of people when you get most of that stuff in an afternoon? So we're seeing big changes, big adaptation. My friends at Onyx One, the expert network guys, I don't know how you build an expert network any longer unless you're GLG with respect to AI. I mean, it just kind of kills the foundation of your business. So we're going to see big changes, but we're also going to see big adaptations that will make those consulting firms much more interesting, because they're bringing together the tech and the MBA stuff, if I may put it that way, in one package. And that's exciting.
That is exciting. And John, what you said resonates with me, but also Pedro, how you've described it, right? When you were speaking, I hope I was listening thoughtfully and intently. But what came to mind is that if you can become the infrastructure or the utility within this sector, you're on to a winner. Because I always think about the utility piece. When you turn on your water, you switch on your... listen, by the way, the caveat here is we're talking about developed countries where you can switch on your water and all that, right? I don't want to fail the so what test. But when you switch on your light switch, you don't give a shit where it comes from, right? You don't care on a general basis where that power comes from, or where that water or where that gas comes from. And I think that's potentially the beauty of where your platform and where you guys can go within that particular sector. So that the way you described it, Pedro and John, really brought that to life in my mind. So I hope you can realize that ambition. So, guys, I want to look at a stat that I came across. I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, and as it turns out, John, you might be responsible for this stat. According to the Harvard Business Review, there are between 800 and 1,000 talent platforms globally. Now, caveat again for our listeners, this is from around the period 2017. I've tried to get more available information from the International Labour Organization, which sort of ties in with John's original figures. But let's assume that there is that many talent platforms globally. I think it's fair to say, John, Pedro, Alvaro, that a lot of the talent platforms or platforms providing stroke people or service, right, however way it's cut up, have struggled to be adopted by the large enterprise for a whole host of reasons. Some are lack of readiness, lack of integration, compliance challenge. They don't understand the governance risk layer that the large enterprise buyer typically requires. There's a whole complex ecosystem around this of MSP and staffing and VMS, and it just gets lost. But there's a multitude of reasons for that, and we probably could cover that at length. But in your view, gents, why has that struggle been the case, right? And why or how potentially can you guys and your platform solve for that challenge? How can you become more adopted by the mid-market or indeed the large enterprise globally over time?
Fellas, who wants to take that? I'll take a shot. And the shot that I would take is that we're always going to be on the back foot with big enterprise companies. And we will, because the reality is that their concerns and their issues around security, around privacy, around safety, are their concerns around their legacy data are significant enough that if we go after that ourselves, we become we become a provider that doesn't have the history and the relationships and the time to demonstrate that versus some of the other folks. So we've taken the approach, Connor, of working through and with partners. So, for example, there's a large partner that is working with a large petroleum company. Petroleum companies have unique data requirements, et cetera, et cetera. we found a way to work with them, not by integrating our stuff with their data system, but by providing specific agents that work on specific problems to solve specific concerns. That seems to be able to make things happen. And over time, we hope to be able to provide more resources and more opportunities to work with the big companies. But for right now, I think it's really a focus on the mid-market from the perspective of working closely with them, building relationships with them, and always working with partners that bring us in. So I think that's the answer. Fellas, what would you add to that? I hope I've answered it correctly.
Yeah, I think that's it. If the need of this AI and people working together is a need of every company in the market, of every industry, of every geography. So the demand is absolutely huge, and lots of companies are trying to help them in different ways. We came up with an offer that we believe is based on the people perspective instead of the tools and technology perspective. So what we designed was not based on tech capabilities, but actually based on understanding of how change happens within an organization and how to map the anxieties and needs and concerns of the people involved into those. So the problems that we face are a director of a company that is using AI and feeling really productive, but then he looks around and say, but my team is not using it. They could be more productive and they're not being. So that's the kind of problem that we solve. We solve problems like, well, I just figured out I could do something to offer my clients that I have never done before. But I'm trying to do it, and we're not launching it. My team here is having a hard time shipping this new idea and this new project using AI. I see that there is a lot of dumb processes and things that should be automated within my company, and they are not. And I look around and I see the competition, a new entrance player, a new player here in my region could just start heavily automated. And I am not automated. So how's that going to be for competition in my region? So those are the problems that we solve. Those are the problems that we tackle. It's not about having an AI tool and AI capability to offer. We're pretty agnostic on this. We just, every 15 days, our and I look around and say, well, this and this and this are great things that evolved this week. So let's start using them. And we just plug what's new within what we offer.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I understand. And one of the things I don't think I'll labor on this too much. I wanted to talk about the compliance challenge for platforms, but I want to look at it in a slightly different way, if I may, Jen. So, there's been a number of significant regulatory pieces now in relation to artificial intelligence, right? So more recently, we've had the EU AI Act, which really goes into effect in 2026, although there's some governance requirements around it at the moment. Then we had the big AI Act in the United States, right? So pretty much the world's largest markets, with the exception of China and India, have a lot of regulation in it. So when you're deploying your digital worker, Gaia, are you concerned about any regulatory hurdles or challenges that you may face as a result of these sort of regulations?
I can answer that. We feel it's really, really important to have regulation over AI. This is powerful. This is new, and we need to make sure it's aligned with society best interests. So what we do is that you cannot talk about that in general terms. You have to regulate in general terms. But when you are within a project or within a situation, you really need to apply that within that specific scenario, where that goes. And we all understand that this is new. It's not matured yet. So some companies that we work with, they come up with questions that don't make much sense, but because they are still learning how to assess security and compliance over this stuff as well. And it's okay. It's that part in the movie where things have not unfolded yet. So we just have to deal with it. I mean, yes, we deal with it, and we do it case by case and going deep into each of the situations, each of the questions, each of the concerns, and twitching around the way that we assemble the tech so that suits best that particular need. Because the need is not just one. Each company in each use case will face different needs. So you just have to be part of that discussion, but that needs to be in place. We feel that's very, very important.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Gents, want to look at some really interesting forces at the sort of macro big picture level at the moment. So in Western labor markets and developed, so-called developed labor markets, there's been a general demographic decline or deficit. It's been referenced in The Economist, New York Times, a whole lot of august populations. But if you look at the European Union birth rate since the 1960s, it's essentially dropped by a factor of 33% over a 60-year period. What that means, net, is that we simply haven't produced enough people in the workforce. That's in Europe, of course. There's a similar trend line in the United States as well. And what saved both economic blocks, if you like, has been inward migration. Now, on a general basis, most countries in the European Union and, of course, the United States have closed their borders. So the net result of that is less people, demand for jobs, and less people able to come in and perform those jobs. So we've seen this wide-scale decline or deficit emerge. And then when you look at other countries such as India, Sub-Saharan Africa, the populations have started to explode. But that's one force that I'm seeing. The other force is relation to technology, and it's not just the emergence of AI, it's the deflationary cost of technology, if you like. So for example, the price of a television in 1999 versus 2024 is roughly 99.7% cheaper, right? So it's dropped like a stone. The cost to deploy an AI agent, right, as they're now called, over a 7-year period has dropped by about 99.5%, according to the data that I've seen. Then, so that's force number 2. Force number 3 is the cost of people in Western labor markets has been increasing incrementally over a 7-year period across the OECD region. So you got less people, technology costs dropping like a stone, although, of course, when you're building a technology platform company, it might not feel like that. Of course, I appreciate that. But on a general basis, deflationary, yet the cost of people is going up. So in my view, organizations are going to be faced with a choice, right? Despite their morals, despite their ethics, etc. What are you going to choose if you're in the profit business? Are you going to choose expensive people? Or are you going to choose inexpensive tech that can do the job of people, right? But anyway, that's not the question, but I'd love you to consider that. But I suppose my question really is, how can a platform such as yours address those 3 forces?
A couple of ways. And let me try to tee this up. First, what you've described is a perfect storm of utilizing AI, utilizing new technologies. I mean, it just makes sense because you can't afford more expensive people that bring in less than the technology brings in. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. So the first thing is, do you see what I mean by that? So the first thing is, why would you hire somebody for an average price of $80,000 when the tech that does the work that person was hired to do is more like a tenth of the price? I think what we're going to see, Connor, is a new way to think about what talent means. In a world where knowledge is democratically available, the knowledge worker is no longer the scarce resource. But there was a wonderful article in Every last couple of weeks that said that while knowledge is becoming less impactful because it's more widely distributed by generative AI and all kinds of other things, wisdom is not. Wisdom becomes the scarce resource for the future. Knowing how to use the knowledge, knowing how to apply the knowledge, understanding the risks associated with the knowledge and with the process. So I believe that what we're gonna see is a tremendous growth of education and learning and talent management and development, recognizing that while we may be losing the benefit of the knowledge worker per se, we're increasing the need to have people who know how to use that knowledge, who know how to deal with that knowledge, who know how to create that knowledge anew. So I'm very excited about the future rather than worried about what that future is. Does that make sense? What's your thought about that, you guys?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would add one extra force, Connor, from the three that you mentioned.
Yes, Pedro.
There's also these well, we saw that happening with the freelance community, right? You become your company. You are your company. And that is now taking a spotlight in a surrounding where you can do so much more. So just you as your company can offer so much that you didn't before. Just because you can produce your own website, you can create your own software, you can do all sorts of things that you were not able to do that by yourself before. And so I also see a force like this pulverization of entrepreneurship
Totally.
that really
Yes.
relates to the freelancing world, and that will probably bring us into into competition in the market that is more pulverized than we have ever saw.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I love that too, John. And I think, Pedro, you're on to something there. I mean, this is just my thoughts. I've no empirical or other evidence to substantiate this. It's just a thought experiment. But my bet is that there'll be a lot more companies than less, and there'll be a lot less large enterprise companies than more. And it's really interesting actually to see companies like D, right, that have 25,000 clients, right, in the space of let's say a 6-year, 5-year time horizon. And I think, yeah, I think that strategy is quite interesting actually, and it's more than likely to pay off. And if I was a betting man, which I sort of am in a calculated way, I think the direction of travel is probably for more fragmentation, and therefore there's more opportunity for platforms like yours, and I hope like mine in my day job. But yeah, I agree with your analysis, gents. I think I think that's absolutely spot on. Um, Guys, I'm thoroughly enjoying our conversation. I think this is, I was going to say this is my first three-way, but I don't know if that's an appropriate descriptor, but it's the first time that I've ever had three guests. Yeah, it's not, I think I'll have to cut that, but it could be somewhat amusing in the outtakes. But
No, I do think you're an attractive man.
and right back at you, John. I admire you for your looks and your intellect, of course. But I want to finish, gents, if we may, with a question that we ask all our guests, and I'd love to get each of your view on this. And the question is as follows: what is your prediction or predictions for the future of work?
Alvaro, why'd you take it?
So I start. So I get I pick the short straw. Playing a futurist is great because you don't need to be right. But I think I'll pick up on what we were just talking about, right? I do think future of work is going to transform in a way that work as we see today is very hierarchical and structured. There's a company and a bunch of people are part of that company. I believe that's going to change dramatically because of people's ability to essentially by themselves do so much more. And therefore, the ability that they're going to have on just picking what they want to do and work on more interesting things and getting a lot of the boring things that such organizations were created to make sure it still happened, those are not going to be a need. People are going to be free to do what we humans do best, be creative, create new things, use all the Lego blocks that we have available. I think that's just going to significantly change how we perceive work. This notion of a job as it exists today, I believe will change and continue to accelerate the notion of global work as well. Even the four of us would not be having this conversation without the internet and global connections.
Right.
So I think this is going to be yet another significant layer into that type of transformation, allowing for something that I think would be quite natural to the young generation that is growing up today. But for us, it's going to sound like magic.
I love it, Alvaro.
So that's perfect.
Yeah,
I'll try to, Lauren, please.
please, Pedro, please.
I'll try to add just two things. into what Alvaro said, because I think he set the structure perfectly. That change and that transformation seems also to imply a broader amount of offers in the market, coming from very fragmented sources, but with new ways of looking at things. So more invention, more creativity, more different ways to convey your message, and also a redesign of what is needed. I love when John says that we're redefining what talent means. I think that's deep. That's so connected to this vision of the new workforce, and how the structure is applied, and how technology and people are flowing around to produce value as a company. But on the other hand, that also means that anywhere that we have a gap on digital inclusion is going to be very cruel to those that are not included, because more and more of the economics are gravitates toward this new world we're building. So as a society, as well as a global society, we need to cater for how do we deal with this, those questions that we, let's face it, have not been able to really address. They're going to become more and more important.
Agreed.
That's great. I would add just a little bit,
Sure, John.
and that is, if I look at my own situation, I think it says something about the future of work. One is, I don't think age is a factor anymore. I mean, I'm 73. Lots of other people are starting companies in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, or their 20s. I mean, God bless, what was his name? Lucky, who sold his company for $1 billion to Meta, and he was 18 or 17, something like that. So one is, age ain't a big deal anymore. Second is, I think we're going to see people creating and then recreating and changing all the time. I was part of a business for 2 years with Matthew. I loved every minute of working with Matthew, but it wasn't going to scale in the way that I hoped that this would scale. And so I've come together with Alvaro and Pedro. I didn't know Pedro 3 months ago, and now we're partners. I've known Alvaro for 10 years, and I've always wanted to be his partner. So we've created it, and hopefully this one will maintain. The third thing that I think is just so interesting, I wrote some stuff a long time ago about the notion of somebody being freelance light. And the notion of freelance light was that I had a full-time job, but I'm also a side gigger. And because I'm a side gigger, I want to be treated like a freelancer in my full-time job. I want more choice. I want more agency. I want more flexibility. And if you don't give it to me, I will be miserable. Perhaps I'll stay, perhaps I won't. But it's clearly violating expectations for the future. So we're seeing all sorts of things happening and changing that are impacting the way we think about work, the way we think about life, and the way we think about the interaction of the two. And for me, the great pleasure of this is at the advanced age, I get to work with two guys from Sao Paulo. I'm living in New York, and we're making it happen. So we've lost time, we've lost age, we've lost direction, we've lost location. I mean, oh my God, what an interesting time we've created for ourselves. So I'm excited about the future.
Wow. Well, John, Pedro, Alvaro, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining the show. Thank you so much for outlining the problems and challenges that your amazing platform and business is solving for and going to solve for. And of course, we wish you every success. So guys, where's the best place for anyone of our listeners to reach out to you guys and find out more about Mensch?
Mensch.work. mensch.work. WORK.
Wonderful.
We would love to hear from you. And by the way, it's all our first names by Mensch. So I'm John at Mensch, Alvaro at Mensch, Pedro at Mensch. Write to us. We want to hear from you.
I love it. Well, gents, all the best with everything. And thanks so much for making the time for me, making the time for our show, and of course, making the time for our listeners. Wishing you every success, gentlemen. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Connor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.